Oh, if I have a negative profit in all four rows, I have
You'll
like
prob-
both numbers 3, 1, 3, 3, and but profit is negative.
You mean the profit or max profit?
Profit and max profit.
One
So
second. Let me just check one thing on my end. Shouldn't be a case, however. Just checking. 1 second. But under bot category or under bot column, do you get the numbers? And are those numbers positive?
yes, they positive. So
Positive.
that's why it's surprising me that profit is negative. Maybe some mistaken.
No, don't think so, to be honest. 1 sec. Just let me just kind of like review my calculations. Nope, everything should be right. Just checked. So yeah, please think again for the next 10 minutes, and then if nothing happens, I will include and to provide you my kind of like my calculations or my formulas. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Can I see a question? 1 second. Size in proportion of market, and we assume it doesn't change with price. Yes. Basically, we are assuming that for now they're all fixed.
Oh, sorry, it's negative because I not entered the new price field, so it calculated
Well,
with.
that's why I said spend some time, think about it. No worries, all good.
Okay. And these new price fields, we should calculate them by which way?
Basically, everything was explained, but you may try, first of all, to try with your own assumptions first. But then when you decide to use a solver model, you can change those prices in order to maximize the profit. I hope it answers the questions for now.
Okay, understood.
No problem. So again, guys, just a heads up, feel free to kind of like refer back to the example with burger, Coke, and fries, because the setup, the sets of the columns you would need to use would be following very same methodology. There is a particular reason why I left four empty columns here in between both and bundle max. So think about it. 8 more minutes left. How are you guys doing? Any progress made? I'm assuming everyone is working tirelessly. Well, as I mentioned, there are some missing columns you need to add, and maybe some calculations based on previous example. Burger, Coke, and fries. So you need probably to calculate or build calculations to show or to highlight the difference consumers are getting from their willingness to pay, between their willingness to pay and your prices in the form of consumer surplus. So again, not giving you all instructions. I'm forcing you guys to think, because if I do this exercise by myself, just showing you, it will indicate that I did a poor job explaining this to you. I need to force you guys to think and practice it. So you, by the end of this course, will know a few interesting tricks. And yeah, don't forget to save this file, because again, it would be kind of like your indication of your participation today. So in order to get a participation grade or participation mark, you will need to send it back to me before our classes tomorrow. Well, Igor, it could be. I just don't know what sets of prices you choose. So you will be the one who will be taking us through your solution. But my number is pretty close. I got 1071. So I believe your rationale is right. So don't worry about that. But you're on my list. Kenneth, you are probably either not specified prices, sorry, or maybe missed some calculations, because I believe Victor had the same issue originally. Oh, sweet. Sweet. Glad to hear that, guys. Any other people? Because again, I know volunteers who will be presenting a part of this calculation, but I need a third person who can calculate it. Ah, I see. No worries. Yeah, it can be. Yeah, Tatiana, it can be. I just don't know, again, what sets of prices you chose, but most likely it's a accurate result. If you're getting the positive number in the end, if you're talking about max profit, so, and I mean above zero, of course, so that means that you may want to try tweaking price a bit, or may want to try change some base assumptions. But overall, you should get something around 1,000. At least it's something I'm expecting guys to see. Yeah, so man, see the result. Okay, sweet. A few more people.
Oh, I have have the same result as Igor, but I put as a maximum for these fields which we should variate. I put the range for them. A minimum is a price. It's a cost. Fields, and the maximum is a maximum from these fields which we have for segments.
So, okay, that work, but let's wait for a few more people so we can show it basically based on someone's calculations in spreadsheet. Okay.
Okay.
So just one question: Andrei, Adele, Alexander, Kirilla, Tatiana, how you guys doing? Kenneth as well. Okay, Kenneth, I see your response. Andrei struggling. Okay. Adele, Alexander, Kirilla. How are you guys? And Tatiana? Tatiana, I believe I saw your response. Okay, cool. Alexander, I see it. Adele, what about you? Okay, thank you. Cool. Okay, Victor, can you share your screen so you can take us a part of the way you created this group or this calculations in these cells, and then Saman will take us through the way he came up with the price. Does it sound good? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
1 second. Let me just actually pass on sharing so you can share your screen. 1 second. Pum, 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 pum. Yeah, should be on you. Yep, I can see it.
Okay. Okay, great. So I just put in each of the field on the right the formula to make a difference between this field and this our costs. And the second and on the right is the right of it and the cost of it. And just move it. So in general, I just create one formula and move it, and I just fixed that for we fix row number 7 to our basis value for these differences, and then I calculate these differences, and on the right side of them, I calculate the maximum from these differences. And then my both items was calculated, and profit items
basically
was calculated.
based on the formula I provided. Victor, a quick question. I see, yeah, Kenneth is asking, could you double click on cells in the column G, H, and I, and G, so we can see the calculations? Yeah, just to highlight them. Yeah, so basically, yeah, that's the accurate. So you took the price, the maximum price, the consumer or the segments, people in the segment were willing to pay, and subtracted to the cost. But what else you can do, in fact, you also may want to try to adjusting the prices based on not the cost from the top, not from the row number 7, but you want to change your formula to the row 16. So instead of using, for example, instead of subtracting maintenance max, so cell C11, E11 and E7, you may want to try subtracting E11 by E16. So then when you will change the prices and everything else, it will affect all the results on your end, therefore. So for example, I believe, one second, I saw some responses. Saman, could you provide please your prices for all of the products you calculated? So something like machine price was, for example, 1400, etc. So we can change it on our end, while Victor is quickly adjusting the constraints and the model specifications on his end, so we can just see how it works in real time. Okay. So Victor, could you, I see. Could you adjust the prices under new price? So for machine, it remains the same. For maintenance, it would be 1200. 1200. Yep.
100.
And for bundle, just put 2000. For now, okay. And then can you show us your calculations once more? So basically columns G, H, and I. So just to make sure that everything was changed accordingly. Yep, okay. And for G? And for G column, sweet. So then you see max profit right now is smaller. So then click on solver. We're gonna go and to see the specifications. So basically what else you can do? So first of all, you can remove all the constraints you currently have selected. So just delete all of them. And I'm just gonna give you some other instructions. So for example, right now, add a new constraint for machine. Select machine to be not higher than, yeah, you have the right one. Constraint would be 3000.
Yeah.
And then, you know what? Sorry, let's revert it back a bit. So click cancel. And then click change, yep. And select all new prices. So columns, cell C, E16, and F16. So the whole new price ranges. So the constraints remains the same. Yeah, you just change the ranges. Yep. Yeah, it would be the opposite. Yeah, cell reference. But the constraint remains the same. Yeah, so for constraint, change it to 3000 back. And the cell reference, change it to 3 cells.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, then click on add one more group of constraints again. So select all those 3 new prices. Yep, click on the operator equals. Equals? Yeah, equals, and type integer. INT, it should work. Yep, integer, yep. And click OK. Okay, that's probably like a limitation. Okay, click OK. And then try to click, you see that there is a button on the right. Yeah, integer. Yeah, int. Yeah, that's correct. On my machine, it's reflected differently. Yeah, so that was accurate. Yep. So just select the entire range and select equals integer.
Already done. Something more?
Yeah, and then let's select the lowest range for all our prices. So add new constraint. So use the entire reference. Yep. And select the minimum price of 4070. Yep. As per maintenance price. 470. 470. Yep. Okay. And yeah, we have all of them. Change the method from nonlinear to evolutionary. Yep. And then solve. Should be it. 1 second, giving it a try. Is it calculating on your end? Because I cannot see.
Yeah, it's calculating.
Okay. So basically, you guys just got a chance to see like different assumptions being tested and everything else. We're just waiting for the result being returned on Victor's machine. And that's it. So basically, you're, again, limited just only by your imagination as well as profitability metrics or profitability expectations you are having based on your assumptions. So let's give it another minute. If not, I can, okay. All constraints being satisfied. Okay, basically I see your max profit became 553. I ran this model for longer on my machine. So let me share my screen so I can show you guys the solution on my end. Victor, thank you so much.
I will end.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, sweet. So then I'm just gonna basically show you that I got the result of $1,071 as a max profit. So the prices being selected slightly different. So maintenance fee is basically the highest, which was possible to be chosen. The machine price is also the highest, and the bundle price is slightly different, basically slightly above the bundle max, because I didn't use bundle max as the maximum price for this particular segment. So again, just something to think of, because I believe probably the most accurate answer would be closest to 1,000 and maybe like 900 in this case. It's just the matter of adding more and more assumptions, as well as just to making sure that the prices are not, for example, surpassing like our new prices, not surpassing the prices on the bundle max column. I see some questions. So Igor Kapunin, but in this case, we obtain bundle price higher than max. Yeah, but basically it just basically what I was saying, Igor, that I just didn't include that assumption. So again, the most accurate answer probably would be 900. But overall, in terms of like the assumptions I used, they all were pretty much the same. So again, it all, for example, in my case, I should have added in other constraints, something like this, and the value would be 2,350. Still lower than the bundle max, but let's give it a try. Maybe it will improve our model. And I'm just hitting solve. So we'll see. Maybe it will return answer fast enough so we can view it. Igor, did you get any answer based on your model? Did you get a chance to improve the max profit? Just curious. And other guys, yeah, please, Igor, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I've obtained higher max profit, but I stuck also on the bundle price, which is now higher than the max. So yeah, I should play with the numbers like more to add more constraints just to obtain more reasonable results, maybe.
Okay, cool, thank you. What about other guys? Okay, your sheet profit is 207 for person who bought one machine, 900 over our cost. 1 second, not quite following. Just trying to see. So Kenneth, could you point out which cell you're referring to?
Yeah, so if you look at the second group, the 23% group. So
Yep, 23 or 22, sorry.
Yeah, 23, yeah. So they bought one machine.
Okay.
At a price of $1,450, the cost of $550, so $900 over, but our profit is $207. Is it normal to be maximizing profit based on people's negative consumer surplus? And like, why would, it's a strange maximization.
It's not basically a strange maximization. It's just the way I basically defined all formulas. So basically everything in regards to profit related, or basically 1 second, I believe my model is over. So I can show you the actual calculation. So the whole idea of this task was, first of all, to give you a sense on how you guys can play and tweak those formulas for number of units bought or number of bottles bought, as well as how much profit you generated on those. Because the reason, for example, for this particular model or this particular profit assumption, that you have the base cost and you have the customer willingness to spend. So the profit would be everything calculated above the surplus, if it makes sense for you.
Yeah, I guess calculating negative surplus for someone who buys 0 machines should probably not be inside the model.
Well, you can tweak it the way you like it. For this particular case, it's just the matter of saying that the people that, for example, machinery surplus here in this case equals 0, that essentially person may buy it because it's about the number of, it's about the negative number. So therefore it is considered as it was purchased. So again, something you want, or you may want to play around on your end, just to add and just to improve your model. Because again, it just is for demonstration purposes.
Kind of like the Kant's idea of profit. It's my profit plus also my customer's profit. It's everybody's profit. The most benefit to everyone.
Well, again, depending on how you define and how you put all the formulas together. So, okay, just terminating my calculation. So, okay, guys, let's have 10 minutes break. We run out of time, and then we'll continue with remaining items for today. So partially it's the remaining part of the pricing analytics lecture, and then moving averages and benchmarking. But that part should be, yeah, should be all finished by the end of the day today. Cool. So break till 17:33, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. See you guys in 10. Okay, guys, is everyone back at the desks? Thumb up so I can see it, please. Okay, 3 people, I can see it. What about the rest? Sweet. Yeah, thank you, guys. Okay, so let's carry on our journey. So again, it was probably the last exercise for today in Excel. So right now it's just a bunch of materials. So again, I will just go through it, and if we won't be able to cover everything today, just remaining part would be for your reading at home reading, so to say. So basically, we covered.
I have a really quick question just before we move away from that model. So does Solver try to avoid zero sales in any segment?
Well, and yes and no. It depends on what you specified as the model restrictions, as well as the way you define the formulas. But essentially, if you specified that the value you are referencing would be equal or larger than 0, yes, that in those cases it may be using zeros, but in others it should be automatically pushing towards the next number after 0, which would be 1.
The one, that segment number 2 that has that one, the outlier low value, if you play around, it seems like that outlier low value has a real profit minimizing effect on the whole situation, you know?
You're talking about maintenance max value, right?
Yeah, that's right. Excuse me.
Yeah, all good. That can be the case, but that's why that we may not be necessarily interested in selling our offer to the particular segment of people because of the, for example, the price they're willing to take or willing to pay is not matching our interest. That may indicate that we won't be necessarily selling our maintenance services directly to them. So again, it all comes to the way that the model is defined, as well as the quality of the data in. So I got what you're saying, but just like the main takeaway I want you guys all to have, that everything comes to the quality of the data and the rationales you use. So if something doesn't make any sense, you always can fix something up. Yep.
Yeah, no, I often find that mistakes or errors are the things that are the most useful for learning. Yeah.
All good.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Cool. Any other questions? Okay, sweet. So let's move to our next or other sets of pricing methods. So basically, we also will need to talk about nonlinear pricing strategies. So nonlinear in the sense of we have either quantity discounts or discounts which are applicable based on our rationales, like as two-part tariff. So for example, quantity discounts, it would be anything. So we're using one price point before the cutoff, a number of cutoff units, and another price after the cutoff unit number. So for example, non-standard quality discounts are the best example of those. So for example, if the customer buy less or equal 1,000 number of units, we will be charging the price for $10 per unit. But if it's more than 1,000 units, so 1,001 units and basically up to infinite number, the price will be $8 per all units purchased. So again, it's not standard quantity discount. So some companies operate under those assumptions or under those models. But overall, the standard quantity discounts, which we probably will be dealing the most, would be this type of discount when the customer buys or purchases less or equal 1,000 units, the price will be $10 per unit. If 1,001 units and above that number, the price will be $10 per all units before 1,000 units, and $8 for all the units above 1,001. And two-part tariff. So that's a slightly different type of the tariff, and the reason it is mentioned that it is commonly used for industries where you need to pay some sort of like a membership or some sort of flat fee. So at the same time, you're covering most likely fixed costs established by the facility you're getting the service from, but then you need to pay like the margin, the premium price, or the extra money to play a game or to get one-time service, which would be directly linked to variable costs. So for example, in the case with golf club membership, you're paying $500 for the membership regardless of the number of games you may want or may not want to play. But every time when you go and want to play a game, you need to pay $30 extra. So everything membership related is mostly two-part tariff if we are talking about flat membership fees. So another method is tiered pricing, and I believe you saw it many times. It's kind of very similar to non-standard quantity discounts and standard quantity discounts, but overall, you have the tiered approach in the way you are offering products as well as the services for a particular price. So you may consider tier pricing as something based on number of units sold per tier. So for example, tier 1 support or tier 1 product offers. You don't offer product support, any customer support, but people are willing to, or people can buy your product for, let's say, $50 price. But automatically, when they're purchasing, let's say, more than 30 units, they kind of automatically will be redirected to the tier 2 pricing. So more than 30 units, it's $75 per unit, because at that time it requires more support or more interactions with your company. So think about this in the next way. You are having, or you are the owner of the warehouse. So if it's some sort of like move in, move out operations. So for example, you have the number of lockers in your warehouse, and you know that one machine, one truck is capable of taking 10 lockers at the same time from transferring those lockers from point A to point B. So having one machine coming in, it's not the problem. So you just basically have your lockers ready. When the trucks comes in, you basically just use the lifter to bring those lockers in. But when you're having, for example, two trucks coming simultaneously or one after another, you need to organize or to have some sort of like algorithm, some sort of procedures, which will require some work on your facility premises. So therefore, it kind of increases or changes the price for this tier, as well as the support and the number of units you're willing to charge for particular price per tier 1. And two-part pricing or two-part tariff. So we will be just kind of like talking more in detail about those. So basically entry fee and usage fee, as I was mentioning, and the price scheming, as we discussed before. So we have very high price for during the launch of the product. So for example, Q1 and the price is high. but then over the time, the price will be decreasing. And there are some issues and some key watch outs you need to consider when using this method. So it works, price skimming works very well with early adopters. So with everything or with all items or services labeled or marked as must have. But over the time, for sure, you will be lowering your prices. Without that, it's not sustainable to run your business in that way. However, the problem may arise when, first of all, you cannot keep the price for the long term steadily and you need to drop it. But because of you are dropping the price, so for example, back to this graph. So let's say that you decided to drop price from P1 price to P2 point for Q1 instead of original as it was planned to P2 point for Q2. So what it may be resulting in? So the result might be, number one, early adopters will be tearing your store apart. You would need to spend a lot of money on public relations because you're basically ruining the idea that only the people who want to get this product as soon as possible need to pay this price. But at the same time, it also may raise the question of people who usually buy somewhere at the Q3. So why are you treating people in a different way? So it's a kind of like a question of the price discrimination at this point. So again, pricing ethics or ethical practices of pricing are very different based on region and based on society. So it's really hard to say what is right to be done and what is wrong based on the environment we are all operating under, especially if everything is very, I would say, overregulated. It's a one kind of a deal, but if it's underregulated, it's a completely another conversation. Plus, the way on how people may be responding. For example, in one country or in one region, people won't be protesting, but if you have a natural monopoly, so for example, like bottled water example, and all of a sudden you were charging the water from, for example, the well for one price, but then you decided that over the time, because of the water being stocked on the shelves for a while, you're decreasing the price. It may create the tensions in the society. So just something to think of. Then price skimming, again, just kind of like the overview, has its own pros and cons. So if we're talking about cons, it only works when your demand curve is inelastic. So luxury products, not the great strategy in the crowded market. So that means that there are not many early adopters who can buy it. Skimming attracts competitors. So every sort of competitors who can sell the product for a price which is slightly lower than your initial price, P1, they may take away all your perspective for future customers as well as your existing customers. And yeah, it can infuriate your early adopters, the way I just explained a few minutes ago. However, that is a good technique to use if you want to maximize your return on investment. It is helpful for creating and maintaining your brand image. It helps you to segment the market because, again, the number of early adopters on average is not very high, as well as early adopters help you test new products because before you actually launch the product to the mass market, early adopters would be, or influencers, maybe again, will be detecting all the bugs. So for example, in the case with Apple software, so once early adopters purchase your product, the first thing they will do as, for example, influencers on YouTube, they will shoot a review and publish it on YouTube. So then they will highlight all the issues they're having with your product. Therefore, you can basically adjust and to change your product specifications in order to create newer product, but at the same time, not sacrificing a lot from your profits. Simple as that. And the last but not least, no, that is the last, is revenue management when we are talking about price analytics. So basically, revenue management is the application of analytics and not necessarily retail related, also market segmentation or marketing analytics and the financial analytics, which first of all helps us to predict the behavior on customers based on the, for example, offers on based the number of items we have to offer. And secondly, it helps us to maximize amount of other revenues in the structure, in the most structured way. So overall, we are assuming that, first of all, we have different, either of those conditions. So we have either different group or different customers who are willing to pay different prices for the same services or commodities based on, for example, either based on their sense of urgency, so right after the product introduction, or they can wait for some sort of like a sale or some sort of like bundling offers coming in. Then businesses or your particular business must have some ability to predict the changing levels of demand ahead of time. So that means that the communications with the customers and the prospects are kind of like ongoing thing. So only a fixed amount of resources are available to be sold at any given time. So that means that it all comes to inventories at this point of time. So you cannot sell something which don't exist, but at the same time, you need to plan all your resources. So it's a kind of like operational marketing or operational activities in order to make sure that supply meets demand, or at least you can satisfy the demand on the market the most to the top level your company is capable of. Plus, it also really helpful to manage a perishable inventory. So for example, the food which should be used for next 3, 4, 5 days, or the oil, because if we're talking about like the raw or crude oil, there are certain time frames during which or within which oil has to be reproduced into something different, like gasoline, gas, or diesel. So each of those products have a different perishable value, perishable inventory. So something to consider. And the revenue management as the idea, it helps you to analyze all these factors together. So understanding your customers, understanding the product specifications, as well as understanding financial background behind that. So when we're talking about revenue management, we may be using some of pricing techniques, better to say like a group of techniques. So basically price markdown. So basically deliberately reducing the selling price of retail merchandise, for example, over the time because of, let's say, clearance. We are working in the fashion industry and we are selling a winter collection. So right now we are approaching the end of the season. So in order to sell all our inventories, we need to have a season sale. So once we get rid of old inventories, but at the same time, we are able to bring new inventories in because the season is changing. So, and some group of, I call them group of techniques, techniques which help you to handle uncertainty. So basically, the common way of explaining this group of techniques is basically overselling or overbooking your sales. And the best example I was able to find, it's number of flight tickets for certain airlines. So instead of, for example, imagine next situation, we have airplane which has 300 seats. But what's gonna happen if, for example, you sold 300 tickets, but you know for sure that 10% of the people wouldn't show up due to various reasons. It's just like the industry standard. So question here, would you still be selling 300 tickets, or you will try to sell 320 tickets? And knowing that there might be one passenger which may show up and don't find the place. So for example, on average, in let's say 90% of cases, all your flights they all fully booked. So all tickets are sold for all seats, but then 20 people don't show up. And all of a sudden, one day you got all the people showing up plus one extra person. So instead of having 280 people on the board of your plane out of 300 seats, all of a sudden you got 300 people already sitting in the plane, maximum capacity, and one person without the seat. It's simple. You will just basically rebook that person for another flight. And when it kind of like goes in a system or in a collaboration with other airlines and with other kind of like flight operators, this approach may work. But again, here you need to calculate carefully whether you in fact have enough of inventories working under this approach, because the problem appears to be very simple, but at the same time complex when you're getting one person, because it's not the huge amount of money. For sure that the number of, for example, the number of profits you make overall should cover that one person. So kind of like a penalty fee for yourself for rebooking or to finding a better spot or better seat in another airplane for that kind of like overbooked person. But what if you're getting the number of 25 overbooked people who don't have a spot? That's a problem. So there are like certain group of techniques you can leverage, and basically the similar way as we did it in Excel, but because of lack of the time, we unfortunately wouldn't be able to cover those. But you're more than welcome just to look it up and to see it on YouTube or basically in any other web sources if you're interested in. So basically it was the last slide on pricing analytics. Any questions at this point? Thumb up if we call, and we can proceed with another lecture. Okay, cool. So thanks God that I estimated everything around this this kind of like case, because I knew that we would spend probably like 2 lectures. So cool. So reason I was saying that I wasn't quite confident whether we should stick with forecasting, benchmarking, and several other topics was a time restriction. Plus, I didn't want to shuffle a lot of materials around for you guys and then just, you know, lacking the overall quality. But 2 things I wanted to check and just make sure that we got a chance to talk about. It's forecasting and benchmarking. So again, on the exam, don't worry, it won't be a question about definitions might be, but techniques or just create the forecast, it's not going to be a question or the task on the exam. The forecasting would be an item on in assignment number 3, but the way you would need to build the forecasting, it should have nothing to do with moving averages. And I'm emphasizing it should not have anything with moving averages. Because again, I won't be the one who will be solving your assignment, but you should find enough information to articulate with and to challenge your judgment based on everything which would be written in that case. Are we clear? So I guys mentioned that, and I will be mentioning that again tomorrow. So this part, topic or lecture number 14, it's more just for your own inspiration and just to give you the overview of certain techniques. But again, it's not going to be like the actual exam question and the actual task. So don't worry about that. So let's talk briefly about forecasting. So forecasting, it's not like crystal interaction with a crystal ball. You're not asking the question, okay, what will be my sales volumes or my market shares in 2 years? It won't be able to answer that question. Self-forecasting is in fact an educated guess on the future may bring. That's simple as that. So the forecasting is good as your data you're using for the forecasting, number one. And secondly, environment keeps changing. So for example, if you ask someone, let's say 3 years ago, that, okay, could you predict the prices in 2020 for real estate? Most likely they will say yes, but they also would be some people who will be saying that, okay, but we're expecting to see the some sort of like a mass pandemic virus overtaking the world in next 6 or 7 years. You would say yes, but okay, tell me the exact time frame when you're expecting this virus, first of all, to break out, and secondly, when and how do you think it will impact the market? No one will be able to tell you the definite answer, the very precise answer, because certain questions, they kind of like out of the scope of predictability, which human brains or humans overall can compute or can organize in a structured way. So sales forecasting will give you something based on really steady environment. So something you work pretty much in your day-to-day routine pretty regularly. If you're trying to predict something extreme based on, for example, you're trying to predict the impact on the coronavirus when no one was talking about coronavirus or anything else, it wouldn't work. So the thing about forecasting that occasionally, so for example, once a year, you need to revise your forecast. But at the same time, if you're seeing that the market shares and everything else is changing on your end, so for example, number of units sold or overall sales are changing, that indicates that you need to adjust your forecast and to step in, take immediate action in order to ensure that the performance overall is not suffering from any sort of external changes happening on the market, either seasonality factors, either something unknown, coronavirus, so to say, or something related to the increased competition on the market. So basically, if we are talking about quantitative data collection methods, mathematical reasoning, you should have at least 1 year worth of sales data. And the reason I'm talking about sales data, because we are talking exclusively about sales forecasting. So data inputs possible to be used for this forecast would be your history. So basically transactions at the time, any sort of like order history, revenues associated with sales of particular items or services, as well as the actual sales numbers. And sales numbers can be both defined in dollar value. So you're forecasting for example, the amount of sales money which you will make based on sales, for example, in next 6 months, or the number of items you will be selling. But again, at the end of the day, you will need to know how to transfer or how to assign the monetary value to all items or services you're estimating or forecasting to sell or to provide within a certain given range. So the money always should be a case, as well as the items. But the way you want to build a forecast and emphasize, okay, I'm forecasting that we need to sell 600 units, or over the emphasis of we need to sell units worth, let's say, $1 million for the next 6 months, is completely up to you and up to your business. So basically, just a quick checklist before we kind of like dive in deeper. So overall, if we're talking about forecasting periods, forecasting can be done by year, but it's not only done. So it's not only done by year. It's done by month, quarter, and year. And it all depends on the objects you're trying to predict. So just some examples. So if you're trying to predict future inventory orders, so you're pretty much well aware on how the demand on the market will look like for the next 2-3 months. You're dealing with future inventory orders. That's the only the forecasting period you will be referring to, and the depths of your forecast will be at the monthly level. So you're predicting 6, maybe 9 month max, because of seasonality factors, because of the number of resources you need to get in and get out from your warehouse, or from example, from the logistical perspective. You require this number of people to move, for example, this group of products from one warehouse or from shipyard to the actual store. So planning. Then future estimated earnings. So next quarter, because each business has its own time to close value. So it may be something simple as 1 week for grocery to, let's say, one item be sold in a month period. So therefore, there is an attribution problem, because let's say that we are assuming that you produced, just a simple example, let's say mobile cell phone. So you produce it in China, let's say in December 2019. But then this phone is being on sale for probably, let's say, has been on sale for 3 or 4 months. And in the end, it was sold somewhere in May. So the question is, how would you attribute that earning, I'm talking money in, to which period? Would you attribute the incoming earnings to your cell phone production in December that you sold that inventory? Or would you attribute to any other inventories produced after December 2019? So again, everything depends on your business model. But the time of the rule, it would be next quarter for estimated earnings, future estimated earnings. And future hiring decision, just next year, because you need to plan ahead all your activities. And basically, if you break down all the projects and activities, it all kind of comes with large projects. Then you're estimating to get the earnings, and then you need to have certain items, certain processes, certain tools in place. So that kind of like breaks it 1 year into several subtasks. So once you put them all together, you will get next year. So just the idea. One important watch out. So all your input has to be representative. So you, over the time, may detect that some of your services, products, usually are sold very well. For example, in May, April-May period. And the reason for that being that you're working in the financial services, especially you're working on the tax returns. And for example, in Canada, usually the deadline for the tax returns would be April, probably. But this year it's very different. So therefore, you want to make sure that you're detecting signals, something regular and predictable, because of the very fixed conditions or just the way that people interact or people behave. So example, like your sales during sales events or Oktoberfest, you know that during this event, people drink a lot of beer. It's a perfect time, and you most likely want to heavy up during that period of the year on your beer production. So just to make sure that all beer you produce, you brew before the Oktoberfest is being delivered to the actual festival location in order to be sold there for whatever the price you want them to be sold. So when we are talking about the actual technique we can use in Excel, it's a moving average. So the moving average is a technique that calculates the overall trend in a data set. So basically, you may want to use moving average to forecasting short-term trends. I'm talking about couple of, from everything which ranges from couple of months to up to 1-2 year maximum, because after that you will need to revise it. And again, if you're talking about the actual sales, I recommend you to revise your report at least quarterly. So then you can make sure that you have, first of all, your original forecast. Then once the new data coming in, so for example, you created the forecast in Q1 2020, then you keep your original forecast. Once the new data coming in, you populated all the data for Q2, you're revising your analysis, and you may see the difference between the actual results and the forecasted results, and that's normal. If you're not seeing the results, that means that you're most likely operating on the right circumstances and all the data you had originally or initially was the accurate. So therefore, you can continue using that analysis as your comparable base. Because again, remember when we were talking about financial and marketing metrics yesterday, there were two sets of metrics which we were able to, for example, use as our key performance indicators for number of sales. We were able to use just the average number for, let's say, 5 years or for 5 months. I believe yesterday it was example of 5 years, and we were able to use KGAR. So the difference between the average value versus the value between the highest, for example, our current state of sales between our desired sales, desired number of sales, and just being split equally into 5 different pieces because of the number of periods we're taking into consideration is 5 years. So something again to think of. How the actual formula looks like. Again, if you're talking about simple moving average representation, it would be just basically the number of years, and basically you are taking the average of those. However, there are certain adjustments you can make. And again, those are not covered in this course. So you can use weightage moving average. So you're assigning that, for example, the most recent data you obtained has the higher accuracy, so it has the higher predictive power. And predictability that data would be better than the simple moving average. If you're using exponential, so you're assuming that sales will be either increasing on exponential rate, either upwards or downwards. So when people asking which technique is best when we are comparing moving average related techniques or formulas, it depends. It depends on how well you are, first of all, on the quality of your data. So how well all your data is structured, and secondly, how well you can adjust and to compare all your numbers. So because of, for example, you're getting new numbers, incoming numbers. On a quarterly basis, you can attribute those numbers to your production, which was done back in December last year. Therefore, it's kind of like gives you one perspective. So you just need to have infrastructure in place, data policies, so then you will be able to make the actual calculations in Excel. So some just things and key things I would you to think about and just to keep them in mind. So moving average, it's more like a signal. It's not, again, a crystal ball. It can tell you that, okay, you detected the signal because of you've been doing this constantly. And then this signal, it is something that you want to make sure you're accounting for moving forward. So let's say that you built the forecast for based on moving average technique for year 1. After this year, you compare the actual results versus estimated results. And then on the second level, you build the moving average forecast again, but because you're having the basis for the comparison, the signals. So the signal here would be the difference between actual and predicted results within year 1. So once you start building the forecast using moving average for the year 2, you can, with certain level of certainty, use all your signals or values differences in numbers for the year 1, for the year 2. So you can say that, okay, if the base was the fluctuation between actual numbers and the moving average was X number, so I probably should assume that the fluctuation between my numbers for year 2 would be X as well. But if we increase, let's say, by 3%, I'm expecting this value to be probably lower or probably higher, depending on where the X, what is the X value. If X value is positive, you may be adjusting your forecast towards increase because you're seeing that the market share is increasing, so therefore the value of X will be lower. But if you see that the market is actually decreasing and everything points out that the fluctuations between your analysis done for year 1 and year 2 were based on increasing market, but now everything is decreasing, you would need to flip the base. So instead of having like a positive base, you will be basically subtracting all your values. So again, it's just an educated guess. So don't consider it as a crystal ball. So some ways you can do it in Excel. So there are sets of manual functions you can consider as moving average replacement. So basically just using average function, as similarly I was showing you in the example yesterday, or basically this number of functions. However, if you guys got a chance to install data analysis add-in in Excel, you can build the moving average function there as well. And as far as I remember, moving average function is really robust in data analysis add-in package because the accuracy there and the way it is created, you can select and play around with weighted and exponential moving averages there. So if you're interested in the examples and actual like formula calculations, I found a very good article, so I include the link here. So after clicking that, you will be automatically redirected. Also, as I talked briefly, don't forget about smoothing your performance results or your forecasting results. So if you want to have the minimum difference, again, always keep in mind that you need to have signals and then adjust your forecast based on the signals values from the previous periods. However, just don't use moving average as a trend line, as we just did for defining our demand and our pricing elasticity. It wouldn't work at all. I'm telling you right away, because the trend line basically just show you like either linear or what's the name? Like a power curve, non-linear. Sorry, finally found the word. Non-linear relationship. So it wouldn't be the right reflection of your forecast. Also, you may want to try using trend functions, not the actual line, and the forecast function in Excel. Those are available, but just side note, forecast function is less flexible and weaker than trend function. So it all comes to the way and the specifications this function is built on. So just something to think about. Any questions before we move to benchmarking? Again, this part, it's more about you guys just thinking, considering, and are willing to build based on your particular business case and the particular scenario you're operating under. Max, thank you. Anyone else? Any other people? Many questions? So we can move to benchmarks. Okay, sweet. Thank you, guys. I have a question about German machine company example. Saman, not now. Sorry, let us finish with benchmarking first, and maybe then we will come back to that question if you get some time. Otherwise, we will leave that, leave your question as well as the example to all our consultations moving forward. Cool? Sweet, thank you. So benchmarking. So first of all, why do we do benchmarking and what is in fact benchmarking? So basically, I believe all of you guys have heard about key performance indicators, KPIs. So think about it in the next way. You have a goal you want to achieve. You're breaking down your goal into indicators, which will be showing you how well you're performing against achieving or not achieving your objective. But at the same time, you need to have some sort of like a benchmark. So basically something you would put, for example, in water just to see what's level, water level is currently right now. And then you may say, okay, benchmark for this particular time of the year is this. So if water level in the river is, for example, 10 centimeters, but because of lack of the rains for this particular season, it's normal. But overall, if we're talking about the KPIs on how much we are going to get water to our turbines in order to produce electricity, hydroelectricity, it is sufficient amount. So again, benchmark is more about measurement. KPIs is about how well you're performing against your target. So when we will be dealing with KPI versus benchmark comparison, benchmark is just it's just the way of measuring. KPI is indication of your performance. So just don't get those two items confused. So benchmarking briefly, why we use them and why they are important. So basically, it is a good way for improving operational efficiency and the product design. It helps us to understand relative cost positioning better. So for example, we realized that the benchmark in our industry, so the average number of human hours required for producing this item is 20, and this industry standard because someone decided to interview 5 different companies, and 4 of those are our direct competitors. And we are spending, instead of 20 hours, 22 hours. So that kind of like measurement makes us wonder, do we really effectively utilize our human hours at work when we are producing particular goods or services? So then it will lead you to another question. So do we need to change something, or should we leave everything as it is? So it kind of like opens a larger bag of questions you may want to start asking, or you may not, based on the current priorities for your company, as well as understanding these kind of questions and asking these questions may give you strategic advantage. So you may start seeing improvements ahead of the time before, for example, new benchmark report is released or a new research paper is published, as well as any sort of benchmarking measurement frameworks in place in your or any other company would increase the rate of organizational learning. So new ideas on how to improve the processes, as well as facilitating experience sharing. Because if you think about manufacturing or like retail related operations, these operations require the number of parties interacting with each other at the same time. So there is no like, okay, our department is working separately, so in other words, in silo, without getting any assistance from the outside. But in order to improve the product, designers need to talk to customer representatives or salespeople in order to understand customers' pain points, which new design concepts or new prototypes may be able to solve in order to run it on a full scale. So because of that, we technically have 3 main types of benchmark classifications. So internal benchmark, everything which starts inside of your company. So something you are trying to improve and trying to aim to make things better. So basically everything which may be starting from comparing how you were doing things yesterday versus tomorrow and versus today, or something in regards to best practices we observed in one department, and we want to bring those kind of practices or efficiency to another department. So that kind of efficiency of the top performing department may be used as a benchmark for other departments. For example, the number of the case resolutions is 30 resolutions per day versus 15 resolutions for another department. So then, again, you are starting digging deeper and understanding what was going on. Competitive benchmarking. So again, it's some sort of report or research made within our or someone's industry. So then we are getting the idea on what our competitors are doing, as well as probably like customers or end users' expectations regarding particular products. And then we technically should make adjustments based on the competitive benchmarks we obtained. And strategic benchmarking. So basically how well we are doing overall, and basically if we are trying to achieve some other goals, like for example, entering new industry, because we are operating under assumption that our product can be used, for example, biochip manufacturing capabilities or biochip manufacturing plants, companies. We can produce chips for medical devices or for clinical testing, but at the same time, we can use it for example, video card production, so anything gaming related. So when we are talking about strategic benchmarking, it's like, okay, how well or our chips in this case are aligned to our goals for serving both needs on both ends, kind of like that example. And again, different benchmarks yield different insights. So you need to know the purpose and when you're using those benchmarks and why do you use then benchmark. So idea is you have a goal, KPI, and the benchmark. And for example, for strategy, structure, and leadership, that sets of benchmarks would be different, for example, from best practice insights and process excellence, because overall, they're not really comparable. They exist in different buckets. So if we're talking about the actual process of benchmarking or the process of building benchmarks, we have basically two main options. So option number one, we are taking competitive benchmarks based on the research or some sort of papers. We have access to our information. And another approach is internal benchmarking. I believe self-explanatory at this point. So if we're breaking down the process even more granular to the actual steps, again, I try to put some more kind of like generalized information for your reference. So basically, we're starting with the current performance analysis. So in order to identify any performance gaps. So for example, you spotted the difference between two different departments and you want to improve the department's efficiency by X by Z%. So how can you do it? It raises a question that, do we really want to work on this project or take this project as our current priority, or we should shift our gears to other priorities, like for example, allocating resources towards user experience design or something like that. So once we have the initial list of ideas we need to tackle, we would need to get the approval from executive leadership team or the people or stakeholders who are in charge of making those calls. Because if we are working with like very large and very important in terms of impact benchmarks, those benchmarks should be used across the organization. So they require support and approval from the leadership team. If it's something like tactical, like conversion rate benchmark for, let's say, carousel posts on Instagram for paid media targeting that particular audience, is something that we can come up internally. So it all comes to the magnitude, to the impact your benchmark would have on the overall business. documenting of all processes, steps, actions, objectives, it is crucial, because all the time, if again you're dealing with important benchmarks, you will go and to review that documentation in order to understand that, okay, why we were doing what we are doing right now and how we can do things better moving forward. So kind of like design thinking, endless improvements of your processes. So documentation of the current processes is really required because you want to make sure that you're having apple to apple comparison. So you're comparing items which are in their core are still the same. So for example, if you're talking about customer satisfaction, you need to consider two things. For example, this year you're manufacturing 2 pens. So for example, one pen in red color and another pen in the black color. But all of a sudden, you decided to, for example, compare whether those pens being sold in enough quantities to, for example, satisfy your profitability. You analyze it, you start putting the numbers together, and you came up with the idea that, in fact, we should add another color for our pens, blue pen. So then when you're comparing the benchmark, so for example, the conversion rates or inventories turnover rates, you seeing that blue pen actually is in fact doing better. That's cool. But if the next year you decided to introduce brand new pen and new features, everything, and let's call this design as a model M1 and another pen as M2, you cannot compare M2 design and M2 benchmarks to M1 because it would be not apple to apple comparison, it would be pineapple to apple comparison, as I like to call it. So again, think about A and B testing. You are comparing only one thread at a time. You're not comparing 2 or 3 characteristics instantly. So, and of course, we all need to agree on the primary metrics. So the metrics that we use to compare. So once we determine the gap, so for example, in the case with pens, we are using as a base for our comparison as, for example, inventory turnover rates, or we can be using something like customer satisfaction rate, just for example, percentage of neutral versus positive or vice versa. So once we have that clear understanding, we would be, first of all, tracking the progress from the present. We are done as of May 1st versus the things we made in, for example, June 1st. And we will try to spot any difference. So we will record everything in a very, I would say, detailed, but a particular way. So we will be able to, for example, if we need to turn a few pages back or to get back, reverse to the previous information, we can find that information. So these preferences, again, will be valid if everyone participating in the study measures performances exactly the same way and every time. So again, framework, methodology, practices, they all should be standardized and organized because comparison of one characteristic is a key. So then you should start putting those metrics in writing. So basically you want to make sure that there is a certain scope of things needed to be measured, certain number of units as a measure to be classified. A and B test analysis, example. Your sample, number of people you are willing to say that they're representative for the number of unit cells. What should be included in the measurement? Any other supportive metrics or any other supportive products? So for example, do you want to use these pens in a box, or you want just to put them in a plastic wrap or any other wraps? So that also important to know. And again, you also need to think, okay, I'm including and excluding something. So listing everything desired and everything undesired. So once you have the base all that information, you need to start making all necessary calculations and have the typical example. So it would be like your operational procedures. So basically, in order to define this metric, I need to do step 1, step 2, step 3, because we tend to think that the things we do in our daily life, especially in marketing analytics, are self-explanatory, but if the value of your work cannot be transferred or being used by someone else, that means that the value of the work you produce is or has value only for yourself, because you are the only one who can read it and who can reproduce it. So just make sure that the value of your work is portable, so others can use it as an example and, for example, make some sort of improvements on the end. And once your benchmark are designed, you understand the gaps of low performance, impact on customers and everything else, you should agree why and how you're benchmarking that finally. So it's a kind of the process of understanding, reassessing, confirming. Once you get to the stage of confirm and everyone is aligned on the benchmark, then, only then, you start using that benchmark, and then you have the list of properties or data items, data requirements you will be collecting from now and moving forward in order to have the consistency in your data. Then once you identify the list of the requirements, for example, packaging, colors, certain shelf positioning as your base for competition and the benchmark, you start seeing and looking for research sources. So can I put my pen in that particular store just to see what would be the benchmark for the conversion or for inventory turnover rates, as well as initiating data gathering. So you may want to ask the business owner or the store operators just to indicate by the end of the day the number of pens sold in order to validate the data, as well as to see how everything works together. So if you're getting the data, for example, on daily basis or on bi-weekly basis or on weekly basis, so that all will kind of come together when it comes to identifying researching sources as initiating data gathering. And screening survey will help you with a partner selection. So all people who will be involved in either data gathering or any other associated processes. It also may be even the customers who will have certain impact on the questionnaires and the way those questionnaires or survey data is structured. And I believe this is the last slide in the benchmarking process. Oops, apologies. So again, because of having framework, it's not necessarily mean that that framework or the plan will be executed. Once a while, you need to QA the execution or how the data is being collected and gathered. It's just the human nature. Once people get the sense that not being monitored or supervised by someone, they may misrepresent or slightly alter the accurate numbers because of it minimizes the time and effort required to collecting those. Then you're designing the survey just to gather information or any other structured way for clients or for getting response from division owners and someone else. 1 second. I have a questions about what common errors are. What are the benchmarks that people think valuable but aren't? What are ones to often use that should be? That's a very specific question, Kenneth, I believe, based on your business. So your business would be the one who will be defining the actual errors. So once you start thinking about, okay, people perceive this value as important, but in fact it's not that important because it all kind of like shifts they focus from one topic to another topic. So for example, you're considering this pen in this particular package as a great item, but then you realize that this pen is not working or not, the ink in the pen is not that great as originally meant to be, it gives you one sense of perception. But if you know that the package or wrap of your pen is not, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, perhaps I can explain. I'm talking about for benchmarks. When people are looking for what kind of thing to benchmark against, what are successful things to benchmark against? What are things that, oh, everybody uses this metric or this benchmark, but it's kind of a waste of time. Or there are some benchmarks that people don't consider very much, but in fact are easy to get and give good value. That's kind of what I mean by the errors, you know, like, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I guess I'm following. But again, answering your question, it would be a very business specific question. So I cannot say without knowing the actual product specification that what is crucial and what is not. You just need to, I believe, understand what would have the impact on, for example, the main objective is to have maximizing revenues. So if particular product wrapping options are affecting your product sales, that means that it probably should be taken into consideration. But if, for example, the location of your product, so for example, if it's located on the top shelf versus the top bottom shelf, it's not affecting your sales. So I think it's not required to be, first of all, collected as a data, and secondly, be analyzed. So the reason we were talking about testing as a result of our segmentation analysis during first 3 days. And again, you getting the hypothesis to test. And once the hypothesis is, the result of the hypothesis is positive, so then the, for example, particular product placement location has impact on the sales. That means that you can include it into your benchmark. So when you adding that into kind of like this framework, you just need to consider that this property or characteristic, does it have the impact on your sales or not? Does it answer your question? Or at least to a certain extent?
To some extent. I mean, I understand that things are specific to businesses, but
I would consider testing as an option. So testing will give you the right sense, because the process of defining and designing the benchmark, sometimes it's very intuitive, but sometimes it's not. And it's the reason why some companies occasionally invites consultants or just consultancy businesses. It's a kind of like challenge the existing beliefs, as well as to look on the things within the company in an unbiased way, so to say. And just some techniques. Yeah, we are, I believe, yeah. Oh, cool. We will be able to cover everything today. So some techniques you can use. So again, there are some data collection requirements, and the processes described prior to this slide. It's all about data collection and communications. So when we are talking about techniques, it's more like a visual representation or indication. So don't consider techniques as a separate part from data collection, because remember, garbage in, garbage out. The quality of your analysis is good, or as far as your data coming in as your data input for the analysis is great. So again, some ways to analyze or to come up with benchmarking techniques. And again, it can be kind of like a looping thing. Brainstorming is actually one of the best, because you can start thinking and basically just throwing assumptions on the fly in order to test them or use them as a hypothesis for future testing. And the actual methods. So methods, techniques, and every other prerequisites to that should be used simultaneously at the same time. So once you see that, okay, we analyze it in a metrical way using, for example, we started with a SWOT analysis, but then we decided kind of like to break it into something else. And for example, based on our SWOT analysis, we've seen that the number of benchmark per report is significant, but we don't know the source of those benchmarks, or we don't know why the competitors strengthen their positions over several years. Do we need to start measuring something differently? So then you start using the brainstorming, coming up with assumptions, and then you go testing those. And tools. The favorite one, process mapping tools like mind maps, or basically just drawing the list of relationship or transitions from point A to point B to point C to point D, and yada yada yada. So therefore, you will be able to identify whether those are coming from some kind of like other things I found interesting or giving a shot, at least here. In fact, I just looked into several of those. Frankly speaking, never used any of those except balanced scorecards. So again, balanced scorecards are pretty much useful for this exercise. Want to explore any other tools, feel free to do it on your own, more than welcome. And the process performance measurements, basically just make sure that you're measuring everything. So once you come up with methodology, you are collecting of this data, and therefore that data is able to tell certain information. Make sure that once your benchmark has been collected, documented, and written down, you are able to transfer the sets of the benchmark into the story. So for example, like positive or neutral feedback as a benchmark. So that indicates a positive or either negative perception about our product or services. And the project management. So techniques, group of techniques used at the first stages of benchmarking study, they are crucial. So anything stakeholder related, communications related with stakeholders, or anything related to the initial data collection, project management is the key. Because once you know the overall scope of your work, then you can break it down into several sections and then approach it kind of like one bottle at the time. It would be easier to build a schedule and a timeline for delivering all those benchmarks. So just a few quick slides about comparison, or why benchmarking is better than comparison research and opposite. So there is no right or wrong answer whether you need to use internal benchmarks or benchmark at the process for your organization versus competitor research. It all depends on available time and resources you have and your availability. So just something to think of. But competitor research is usually very fast and sometimes may not be really relevant to your business if you don't have the right processes built around, for example, problem identification or performance measurement. So your competitor research would be as good as the ability to compare the actual point from competitor research to your current performance. So then you could say that, okay, we are producing number of units, the average time on a shelf is, let's say, 24 days, but the competitors say that the average time on their shelves is 30 days. So let's say 40 on our end and 30 on their end. So that means the competitors is doing work better. But if we cannot say for sure that on our end is 40 days, that means that the competitors' research for us would be pointless. So we just want to make sure that that data is documented. And usually what you see as, for example, as a benchmark report and anything else, like the final output, would look like this. So basically this is competitor analysis, aka research, used or being used as a benchmark. So someone ran the analysis of SEO performance, or basically SEO properties which are affecting competitors' website ranking as well as our website ranking, and they just kind of like came up with this comparison metrics. Useful, yes, but really hard to say, because we can clearly see that competitor number 4 is probably someone out of average, but we just need to decide how we will be fighting those 3 guys in the most efficient way if, again, we want to. This is fancy way. It is kind of like just fancy way of using and basically leveraging competitor analysis research. What you can see in the form of infographic diagrams, very fancy diagrams, the results or data structured in this way. You just need to somehow pinpoint that, for example, we are in the hardware industry, and then basically locate that we are performing with average number of social media posts per week of 15. But the question is, does it really help to grow our business? So that's the question. And it all comes to the attribution. So this picture itself doesn't tell us anything as far as we don't see any numbers behind that, because we don't want to be in a situation when we are dealing with a number of kind of like losers on the market who are fighting downhill battle when we want to fight an uphill battle. And the right way of having benchmarks and everything structured, again, it's just more visually attractive way. This one is more structured and documented way. So there are no issues with you taking these numbers and converting them into something else like this infographic or this chart. But overall, you need to come up with the ideas on what is the average practices, good practices to use. And again, it's not really applicable to marketing, but I found this this example is really powerful, because it will help you to go back and forth and just use it as your reference for the future. So you need to have good practices, typical practices, or average practices in place. Good practices here probably will be the benchmark you will be trying to achieve. Typical practices, the average thing going on the market, or either by your competitors or due to other factors. Basis of the benchmark, where the particular number were taken from. And instead of building type, you will have an object or the particular point you want to compare. Any questions? Basically, it was our last slide for today. This is kind of like archaic at this point. No questions? Cool. So then just one more thing, guys, before you run away from this lecture. Please submit your Excel calculations based on bundling modeling we were doing today, and send it to my email to get a participation mark. And as always, this deal works in the next way. If you want to obtain my feedback, please mention that in your email. Otherwise, no feedback will be provided. So again, it wasn't like the actual full scale, fully operable model. It was something just to give you the sense of perspective on how it can work, because those numbers were partially made up by myself. Partially, I looked them up in the web. So if you're interested in the methodology, I can cover it briefly next time. But if you're just interested in the technical aspect of how to put all those restrictions, limitations in place, as well as the connection between the formulas, and you're interested in the feedback, let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much. And yeah, we're done for today. Cool. Assuming there are no questions. Yep. Thank you, guys. So then, talk to you tomorrow. Have a great evening or a night, I believe, and stay healthy. Bye.